I think it's about time I really get into something that I haven't talked about much on this channel, and it's something that honestly very few people know. But that is the fact that I like Ninjago theories. I know this may come as a massive revolution when it comes to the Weavy YouTube channel, but yes, I do like Ninjago theories. It is just something that is really fascinating to me and something that I actively like to read through anytime I see something pop up about them. And again, it goes without saying that I've of course made multiple videos about this topic before, and if you haven't seen them, please do, because all of those theories are really interesting to think about. But it is about time I give you the much due part 5 to Ninjago theories. And I will say before anything else, if you do want a part 6 to Ninjago theories, please let me know, because I do really enjoy this video. And I will also say that if you do want part 6 to be more in vain to the Ninjago hot takes video, where I discuss your Ninjago theories specifically, please let me know. And if you do want that, feel free to comment them down below. But as for the criteria for this video, it is fairly standard. Number 5 is, in my opinion, the least likely of the 5, and number 1 is the most likely. But feel free to let me know which ones you do agree with and don't agree with. But other than that, let's get into number 5. But as for theory 5, it is actually going to cover the shurikens of ice, and more specifically, the amount of shurikens that we see in a given time. This refers to the theory that the shurikens of ice do actually have the ability to combine into one, and actually forms depending on the situation it is needed. And I will say, for the most part, this does surround the earlier seasons of Ninjago, specifically season 1 and the pilots, because during those seasons the shurikens are very strange to say the least. Because you will see in some scenes there are 2, in other scenes there are 1, it does just become very confusing. So this is the explanation for it. And to an extent it makes sense. I feel like it's something that would be outright said, but in those earlier seasons, it really would explain away how shurikens disappear and reappear at a moment's notice. But other than that, there is contrasting evidence against it. The main thing being is that in certain shots, we do see verbatim both shurikens when theoretically it could be one. I am mostly regarding the episode where Garmadon takes the weapons back to the Golden Peaks, and we see Garmadon hold both shurikens in one hand, but you could just say it needed to be the 2 shurikens for it to be able to form the mega weapon, so it really is down to your own interpretation. But like I said, it does just explain a lot of episodes where the shurikens do go away or reappear at a moment's notice, and there is no outright explanation for it. But where do I land on this theory? Now, for the most part, I will say that this theory does hold some merit, because I will say it does need an explanation as to how the shurikens can disappear and reappear without any sort of rational explanation. Also, outside of the fact that it was simply an animation error. But I like to look at things as an in-universe perspective instead of a studio perspective. But I will also say that while that does make sense, and you could also cite that the shurikens can have their own abilities, because we know that the nunchucks of lightning do as well, because they can disconnect and reconnect to each other, as we saw in Crystallize, unless you believe Pythor when he claimed they were broken. I will say that it also doesn't really make sense to link this specifically to the shurikens, because why would it be unsaid ability be a part of those weapons? It really is one of those things that I could go back and forth on for ages, because there is so much countering evidence with each other that it simply doesn't really make sense unless you consider it one way or the other, because ultimately, yes, it is just an animation error, but why is it in the show? You have to look at it from that perspective. So I really don't know, and it's certainly one of those ones that I'd like for you guys to think about, so let me know. But other than that, let's get into number 4. Theory number 4 is going to cover Aaron himself. And this is one that I do somewhat understand the reasoning for, but I'd also like to think that it's not actually going to happen. And that is regarding the fact that people think that Aaron's spinjitzu will slowly corrupt his soul as if he is wearing a mask. Now, I feel like this goes without saying that the explanation for this does come from the fact that Aaron's spinjitzu does have the same red aesthetic that Shatter Spin does possess. But the thing is that if this is something that will corrupt Aaron, I feel like it is something that we would have to consider before we get into Season 3. But I will say that there is evidence behind this being the case, because people have pointed out that from the moment onwards where Aaron does use Spinjitzu, he does notably become more disconnected and aggressive towards the ninja team. But I do feel like there needs to be more of an outright explanation for it, just outside of that little bit alone. because you could just cite Aaron's disconnect from the ninja just to the fact that he was being manipulated by Raz. And I really don't think it's purely down to the fact he learned Spinjitzu, but it also does somewhat make sense at the same time. But where do I land on it personally? I'd like to think that it's not going to be the case. Maybe it coerces Aaron into falling for Raz a bit more, but I'd like to think that it wouldn't outright corrupt his soul. Because personally speaking, I do think to an extent that Aaron is going to defect back to the ninja. Honestly, I could go on for ages about Season 3 predictions. Let me know if you do want that video. But I do think it's not going to be the thing that completely corrupts Aaron, because I do think to an extent he will need that wolf mask to fully do it. But like I said, there is so much against it that does also make sense, because we do know that the Forbidden Five don't need masks either. So is it the same thing that the Forbidden Five are doing? Who knows? But again, I would love to hear your opinion. But this does bring us into theory number 3, and I personally really do like this theory, because it does regard the elemental blades. Because as we know, the ninja had the elemental blades at the end of Season 2, but at the start of Season 3, we do know that they no longer have them, and Jay explicitly says that he does miss those weapons. So what actually did happen to them? Because we never get an outright confirmation. There have been plenty of theories out there, mostly saying that maybe the Ultra Dragon took them, or that they simply served their purpose, but I would like to present a new idea for it, and that's the fact that they ran out of the elemental powers. Now, what is the basis for this theory? Mainly being is that when the ninja received these elemental blades, they of course are comprised of pure elemental power, but the first thing that they do with them is actually send a part of the power into Lloyd, which he retains until the middle of Season 3. Now, what if Lloyd obtaining this elemental power from the ninja actually caused the elemental blades to become a finite amount of power, because it, of course, didn't have the full elemental ability that it initially had. So what if Lloyd receiving that power made the blades themselves finite, and actually caused the ninja to only have a certain amount of power until Lloyd of course gave it back, because we know of course Lloyd had his elemental power throughout until he gave it up. So what if giving Lloyd essentially infinite power caused the ninja to have not so infinite power? And this is why the ninja by all account lose their elemental blades, because if they did know where they were when the ninja attack broke out, why wouldn't they simply go and retrieve the blades themselves and use them alongside the techno blades as well? Because the thing is, these weapons had to be somewhere within Ninjago, so why would they not simply retrieve it if the weapons themselves were no longer useful? So what if the ninja no longer had those weapons because they simply ran out of power after using them against the Stone Army? I do think it's something that has a lot of merit to it. Because like I said, I fully believe this theory, and I think it does give an explanation for those weapons not being around any longer. But again, like all these theories, please let me know what you think of this, because the elemental blades are something that gets talked about, but only gets talked about in certain aspects. And I do think this new angle to consider is something that actually makes sense in the grand scheme of things. Because like I said, why would the ninja no longer use them against the ninjoids if they knew where they were at the very least? But this then brings us into theory number 2, and this is actually one I've been seeing a lot of lately, and this is actually going to regard the Overlord and the idea that he was initially a Source Dragon. And I've got to say, there is actually a lot to back up this theory, and a lot that honestly just makes sense in the grand scheme of things. And the two main things are, we know for a fact that initially speaking, the Overlord's true form is a dragon. So, that is one thing that matches up with the sources. The second one being is that he is outright stated to be the source of darkness and evil itself. So, he is the source of an element and he is a dragon at the same time. Now, where does that link up to? Oh yeah, Source Dragons! But like I said, this is again one that really does make sense to me, and one that kind of tracks in the grand scheme of things. What if he was a failed Source Dragon, because simply speaking he was evil, and we know that the Source Dragons in themselves seem to be good, or at the very least they seem to be benevolent at the very least. But what if the Overlord being naturally evil seems to have a knock-on effect and cause him to be outcast from the other of the dragons? And like I said, this one really does just make sense to me. I really like the idea that he was potentially a failed Source Dragon. And of course, there are rumors to the Overlord coming back at some point in Dragon's Rising. So what if this is the way, and it gives a further explanation to where the Overlord actually came from? Because all we really know is that he came to be. But then just like that, we are going to go to theory number 1. And this is the begging question of what actually powers Zane. Now again, we've never outright received an explanation for this. There are plenty of theories regarding it, and I know a lot of people do seem to think we know the answer, but we've never had it outright said. So I would like to present the new idea, well, not exactly a new idea, but you know what I mean. But the idea that Zane's power source itself is ice. Or more specifically, a condensed version of ice. Because if you do think about it, let's track back to Season 3. Zane gives Pixel half of his power source, and he loses the abilities of Spinjitzu, and so on and so forth, but that was obviously the main thing he had at the time. But when he links up to Pixel, not only can he do Spinjitzu, but you see ice from both of them. So when the power source is reunited, ice forms once again. And then of course Zane receives actual elemental power after it, and that has nothing to do with his actual power source. But what if the power source itself is just a splinter of the original elemental master of ice? And that is how Zane came to have his powers. Because of course we also know that the ice master did visit Zane, and the next thing you know he was behaving differently, and that is when Wu found him. But what if the Ice Master did splinter off a part of its power, and that is officially what powered Zane? And it also makes sense because we know it's basically limitless energy unless you're powering a rocket ship. But again, I do really think this is one that makes sense in the grand scheme of things, and also, let's just put it plain and simple, his power source does look like ice. So, I do think this is the most logical explanation in the grand scheme of things. But again, let me know what you guys think, because there are countering theories out there. But those are my 5 theories for today, and let me know what you guys think of them, because I do think they are some very fascinating theories to say the least. And like I said, if you do want a part 6 where I go over your theory specifically, please let me know in the comments. Because like I said, these theory videos are very fun, and you guys seem to love them. So I would like to carry on and get you guys more involved in these videos. But like I said guys, that is about it for today, and those are the theories, and let me know what you think of them. But other than that, thank you for watching, take care, okay,